I'm Willie. Welcome to my channel. Thank you for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you're a new viewer, please consider clicking subscribe. Click that little bell notification icon. If you are a return subscriber, return viewer, thank you very much. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. Now, I get the question we're going to tackle tonight, and a lot of this is going to be kind of subjective, and you're going to have to make up your own mind once we lay the case out. I get the question all the time, should I use a USG or should I use an edge router? So that's what I hear. And that's really not the conversation that we should be having. It should be, should I go with the UniFi total ecosystem, or should I go EdgeMAX? Should I go blended? How do I choose? Well, here it is. Let's do this. We are going to talk about UniFi versus EdgeMAX, route switch, Wi-Fi, no beta talk. So this video is being recorded September 30th, late in the evening. As of the recording of this video, as of when it will be published, well, it could even change by the time it's published. You're going to see this Tuesday morning. This is Monday night. This could change, but as of the recording of this video, this is how things are. So I've got this presentation that you can see here. So let's hop over to the presentation and let's get started. Like I said, there's going to be no beta talk here. So UniFi versus EdgeMAX, they're kind of, sort of, but not really the same. In every piece of UniFi hardware, as far as routers and switches go, the underlying operating system is the same that runs on the Edge product, except they have the UniFi layer on top of it, and you have to use the controller to provision those settings for long-term success. So each of the lines, if you look at the way that Ubiquiti markets it, UniFi versus Edge, they're supposed to have totally different use cases. So what Ubiquiti markets UniFi for is the enterprise market. There are some features that I see that are lacking, that are holding them back. At the Edge router, the Edge switches actually make a better enterprise piece of hardware in some cases. In most cases, you know, if you're really stuck and you have to have the single pane of management, if that's really what your goal is, to have all those green bars and bubbles and whatever it's been in the past, then UniFi is going to be for you, but you're going to struggle to do real enterprise things in larger networks. For smaller networks, maybe a couple VLANs, things like that, fine, it'll work perfect. But anytime you want to do anything that's standard in a larger network, or not even a large network, but even small offices have multiple WAN IPs, you just can't do that in the GUI of UniFi. The UniFi layer, as I wrote here, can slow us down and provide problems that can only be overcome with a JSON file, which is a super horrible idea. History has shown this. I have had clients who had Ubiquiti configure the JSON file for them. Everything's working okay. Ubiquiti releases a UniFi update. Now their network is broken. Things don't work, all because the JSON file was there. In fact, Ubiquiti tech support will not configure JSON files for you any longer. That's how bad of an idea that is. Like I said, Ubiquiti would gear UniFi towards enterprise and Edge towards carrier, and that's not really, or service provider, and that's not really the way that I use it, except for I do use the Edge products in carrier / service provider networks, but not Ubiquiti and all enterprise. Yeah, anything that needs more than a one WAN IP address on a USG, it's getting an Edge router. Anything that needs real quality of service, I'm going Edge. Most of my stuff now is Edge. But your mileage may vary. And like I said, small offices that don't need crazy configs, UniFi is going to work 99% of the time. All right. So let's talk about UniFi routers. And remember, we are talking about non-beta products. There's no beta talk here. So don't even bring it up because I'm not allowed to talk about beta products in public. All right. So we do have the USG 3, which you see here. And it does have, the same hardware as the EdgeRouter Lite. It's got 3 1 gig RJ45 ports. It's got the console port. It'll do 1 million packets per second. It has a flash drive for its operating system. We have the USG Pro, which is the same hardware as the EdgeRouter Pro. So you've got a few less ports, but you've got 4 1 gig ports. And those are RJ45. I accidentally put 46 there, but they're RJ45 ports, and 2 1 gig SFP ports, serial port, and you can do 2.4 million packets per second. The USG XG, rest in peace, is probably the same under the hood as the EdgeRouter Infinity. It's been removed from Ubiquiti's site, but not erased from existence. It is still out there. And UniFi claims to have an advanced firewall. Firewall is set up out of the box, but is it advanced? It probably depends who you ask. EdgeRouter is going to have a much more advanced firewall. So when this was filmed, there were no beta EdgeRouters, and even if there were, we wouldn't talk about them. But there's lots of models of EdgeRouters out there. You've got the EdgeRouter X, the EdgeRouter X SFP, the ER5, which is the EdgeRouter 5 with 5 PoE ports, the EdgeRouter Lite, the EdgeRouter 8, the EdgeRouter Pro, the EdgeRouter Infinity, the EdgeRouter 4, the EdgeRouter 6P, the EdgeRouter 10X, the EdgeRouter 12, EdgeRouter 12P, the EdgePoint R6, and the EdgePoint R8. Lots of different use cases there. Great hardware, great software. The firewall is not set up out of the box. You do have to run the wizard or manually configure the firewall, but it's very flexible and advanced. And you can do way more things with it than the UniFi. And we'll get into that. All right, so let's talk about the UniFi security gateway versus the EdgeRouter, and let's talk about network interfaces, right? So they can both do VLANs. UniFi has a 64 network limit. As of the filming of this video, you can only create 64 networks in UniFi, and then it pukes on you. It freaks out, tells you can't create any more networks. The USG can only have one WAN IP. The EdgeRouter can have multiple WAN IPs. I have several of these routers out there that have hundreds of IPs on the WAN interfaces. The EdgeRouter, you can use the interfaces as you see fit. Any interface can be a LAN interface. Any interface can be a WAN interface. If you wanted to get crazy, do VLANs on one port, you could use one port. I don't know why you would, but you could. The USG, you have to use the UniFi software to remap any of the ports, and it's confusing, especially on the EdgeRouter Pro. And so I do have a video coming for that. All right, let's talk about the UniFi security gateway versus the EdgeRouter in the firewall section. So the UniFi comes with default rules, which is set up out of the box, which is great, but you cannot delete any of the default rules, but they work pretty well. And the EdgeRouter, unless the wizard is used, there's no default rules. The wizard creates the same rules as UniFi, and they are very, very solid. You probably will not get a better firewall configuration out of the box. UniFi auto creates guest network rules. We have to manually create those on the EdgeRouter, but I do have that video and that script available. If you need that, you can copy and paste, follow the instructions. Both devices support port forwarding. However, on the USG, you can actually specify the source where things are allowed to hit those port forwards, where you are the port forwarding on the edge router does not do that. You have to do that either at the firewall level, or you have to do that in a DNAT. UniFi does not support DNAT or SNAT. The edge router does. That makes it much more powerful right there. Both support filtering connections on the firewall by IP, but not fully qualified domain name. FQDN, I think filtering is hugely important. All right, so let's talk about VPNs. UniFi and EdgeRouter both support PPTP for road warriors in the UI, but who is still using this, and why are you still using this? Don't use it. UniFi supports L2TP in the UI for road warriors. EdgeRouter, we do either have to configure that from the command line or the config tree, but it does support it. Both the EdgeRouter and the UniFi can use radius authentication for VPN. UniFi comes bundled if you have a USG. UniFi comes bundled with a radius server. The EdgeRouter does not. As far as site-to-site goes, UniFi supports auto VTI and VTI IPsec manual configuration and OpenVPN all in the UI. Auto VPN connects 2 UniFi sites with USGs in like 3 clicks, as long as each USG has a public routable IP on the WAN interface. As far as the EdgeRouter goes, as site-to-site, we have IPsec in the UI, and any advanced functions and OpenVPN can be done via the command line, and then a little bit in the config tree. So let's talk about some miscellaneous things. I just created a few pages that just have some kind of errata on here that I did want to make sure that we talked about. So UniFi does support IDS IPS, but you get a significant hardware penalty for that. The EdgeRouter has no built-in IDS IPS, although where I'm gonna recommend an EdgeRouter, I'm probably, if I'm gonna do IDS IPS, I'm probably gonna mirror port and either offload the IDS IPS that way, or I'm going to have another appliance and I'm going to do that inline. Both UniFi and Edge have ALGs. UniFi by default now has the SIP ALG disabled, and with the EdgeRouter you have to disable it via the command line or the config tree. You can configure, or at least monitor both the Edge line and the UniFi line from a mobile app now. With the Edge line, we have UNMS. It is awesome. It's built differently than UniFi. The EdgeRouter does not need UNMS for configuration. UNMS is beautiful. It has 2-factor authentication. It has an encrypted partition where all of your configuration information goes. It's a different beast. The UniFi team could learn a thing or 10 from the UNMS team. But they have to be careful. If they create too many advanced features in UNMS, nobody's going to need UniFi except for access points. And maybe they need those. We'll have to talk about that. But it does give the backup configs, and the alerting in UNMS is like real time. Like as soon as something goes down, you're getting an email. Whereas in UniFi, I've seen it, depending on how large the controller is, take 5, 6, 10 minutes to get notifications. Both UniFi and Edge have DPI, so that traffic classification, the deep packet inspection. Although as more and more things become encrypted, and especially once DNS over HTTPS takes the driver's seat for DNS, these applications are going to be pretty much rendered useless unless you are capturing all the DNS into these devices first and then passing it out to the HTTPS connection. But that's another conversation for another video. All right. So both the USG and the EdgeRouter can be DHCP servers or can do DHCP relay. Both can act as DNS servers, relay forwarders for the local network. But if so, the EdgeRouter actually has a wizard where you can put those aliases in, and it's not so much really a DNS server. It's kind of like a DNS server, but it's going to intercept those requests, and you can fill those out in the wizard. USG, we have to do it. This will actually survive a reboot, amazingly enough, but you have to manually edit the host file and put, the IP and the host name in to accomplish that with the USG, but it can be done. Failover on the EdgeRouter. If you have failover set up, it can fail over your VPN connections, whether it's client VPN, whether it is a site-to-site VPN, and it can also fail over your port forwarding and your DNAT. UniFi does not fail over VPN, and it does not fail over port forwarding and DNAT. It just doesn't. VPN status works beautifully in the EdgeRouter, and it has been removed from the front screen by default on UniFi. And this is what I was talking about a little bit. So the EdgeRouter can act as a pseudo DNS server using that wizard. UniFi, we can edit that host file. On the EdgeRouter, the wizard set up perfect configurations for load balancing and perfect configurations for failover only. So they really are great configurations, and I use those out-of-the-box configurations all the time. They work beautifully. UniFi versus Edge in the routing setup, right? So the EdgeRouter is actually going to support and does support dynamic routing protocols. So RIP, OSPF, BGP, and also static routing. UniFi only supports static routing on the USG. Once again, we're not talking about any beta devices that may be out there. We're talking about what's available right now, what we're installing today. No beta products. Mainline distribution. No routing. Dynamic, anything like that. Just static with the UniFi side. Quality of service. UniFi supports Smart Queue, and that's it. And that's on the WAN interface. Now that's on the USG. On the UniFi Switch, there is some egress things that you can do on a switch port. You can rate limit there. But the EdgeRouter supports many types of QoS. So many different types of QoS. We could create a lot of QoS videos, but the EdgeRouter handles QoS beautifully if you understand how to set it up. So there's really no comparison there. Really, UniFi's QoS, that Smart Queue, is really a best effort. All right, so now let's talk about the switching side. And remember, we are not talking about beta products. So in the UniFi side, we've got the Switch 8, the Switch 8 60 watt, the 8-port 150 watt, the 16-port 150 watt, 24-port and 48-port non-PoE. You've got the 24-port 250 watt, 24-port 500 watt, the 48-port 500 watt, 48-port 750 watt. You've got the 16-port 10 gig switch. You've got the BT switch. So that's the US Switch XG6 PoE. You've got the Flex, and I don't know why I must have blanked there, the end wall. Well, one of the end walls does have a kind of a switch in it, but maybe I was thinking about something else when I put that in there. The Edge switch, you've got the 5XP, the 8XP, the 8150, the 10X, the 10XP, the 12F, the Edge switch 16150, the Edge Point S16, the Edge switch 16XG, the 24 and 48 port non-PoE, the 24, 250 and 500, the 48, 500, and the 48, 750. So as far as switching goes, available models, there's a lot of options for both sides. There should be something there that covers everything. So switching. UniFi supports VLANs, and it treats all ports as trunks by default. So anytime you create those VLANs in UniFi, every port can take every VLAN, and besides the default, the untagged, everything else is tagged, which I'm not a huge fan of this. I'd rather have to manually go in and configure those VLANs on the ports, which is how we have to do it with the EdgeSwitch. So it supports VLANs, and it is more of a traditional setup where we have to add those VLANs manually, which I consider to be a more secure setup. UniFi supports egress throttling only. No real quality of service. The switches do support LLDP. Edge switches have full quality of service setup, LLDP. UniFi and EdgeSwitch both support spanning tree. UniFi Switch security. So if you're looking for port security on the switch, you got two options. You can disable the port or create a non-routed VLAN. The EdgeSwitch does have port security. In the non-beta world, I'm not going to talk about beta products. So what is available today? UniFi does not offer L3 routing. But the EdgeSwitch does offer static routing, does not offer NAT services. So you can't, go from a routable IP on one interface to a non-routable, to an RFC address. It doesn't do, translation and things like that, but it will route networks, and we use it often to do that. UniFi does not offer ACLs. EdgeSwitch does support access control lists. They both support SNMP, but UniFi is dependent on that controller configuration, and the EdgeSwitch has, I believe, SNMP 1, 2, and 3. The EdgeSwitch has dozens of features exposed that UniFi doesn't. The Edge fits more of the enterprise bill in switching than UniFi does. The EdgeSwitch has too many features for us to actually talk about in this video. Do you want follow-up videos for the edge switches with some of that advanced configuration? Let me know that down below. You're going to have to decide what meets your needs. Your mileage is going to vary depending on how you set your networks up versus how I set my networks up. If you are designing a network around voice over IP, and especially wireless voice over IP, you may want to consider different products. I've got, there are other products that are actually fine-tuned specifically for wireless voice over IP. So then let's talk about kind of the elephant in the room. So Wi-Fi, right? So with UniFi, there are so many different types of access points. I don't even know how many access points they have now. But so you can use all the edge gear, you can use other manufacturer switches, routers, and all that, and you can still go ahead and, use UniFi access points. Like I said, if I'm designing for voice over IP, this is not going to be my first go-to. But everything else, it works pretty well for. So let's just say that you want to make sure, if you want to use all black boxes, you could use an EdgeRouter, an EdgeSwitch, and an AirCube AC, and you could have everything running through UNMS. Now, of course, UNMS isn't completely built out yet, so you can't configure switch ports and things like that, but you can manage the AirCube AC. So it is possible to use your Ubiquiti products, have a full network stack, if that's what you want to call it, and not use UniFi. So you just have to, every network, this, even using, the Ubiquiti gear, it's that same conversation that we had about Cisco versus Ubiquiti versus HP, you know, you have to know what your network design objective is, what you want the end goal to be, and then how you're going to get there. So you really, I mean, you have to figure those things out and then get the gear that works best. Do you want to see an EdgeRouter, EdgeSwitch, AirCube full stack video? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you liked this video, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe. Please comment and share. Please follow me on Twitter and Instagram. If you need IT consulting, go to williehowe.com, fill out that contact form, and someone will be in touch with you as soon as possible. If we can't help you, we'll get you to someone who can. That's our promise to you. If you'd like to support the channel by becoming a patron on Patreon, and thank you to those folks, that link is down below. If you'd like to buy any of the gear that you see here on the channel, my affiliate links are all down below. They don't change your price, but they do kick a couple bucks over the channel here to keep everything rolling in smoothly. Once again, I'm Willie. Thank you for being here. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.